The Gospel of Luke, chapter 19. Today we're diving into one of the most impactful chapters in the New Testament, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19. This chapter weaves together powerful themes that speak to every one of us, whether we're seeking redemption, looking to understand our responsibilities, or striving to recognize divine moments in our lives. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, is not just a narrative of events that happened a long time ago. It's a living message, inviting us to reflect on our own journey of faith and how we can be more aligned with God's purpose. Now, as we explore these stories, let them stir something within you, a call to action, a spark of transformation. Let's begin. Zacchaeus, a story of redemption. Now, the first part of this chapter introduces Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and a wealthy man. At first glance, Zacchaeus might seem like someone far removed from the spiritual path. He was disliked by his community because he collected taxes on behalf of the Roman Empire and likely profited by taking extra from his fellow Jews. He was seen as a sinner, someone who used his power for personal gain at the expense of others. But here's the beautiful twist. Zacchaeus had a yearning in his heart to see Jesus. Knowing Jesus was passing through Jericho, Zacchaeus did something extraordinary. He climbed a sycamore tree just to get a glimpse of him. This act is significant because it shows a man of status humbling himself. Imagine a wealthy, well-known figure in society climbing a tree like a child just to get close to the truth he sought. Now, what happens next is remarkable. Jesus notices Zacchaeus. He calls him by name and says, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." Now, Jesus doesn't condemn him or scorn him for his past. Instead, he sees Zacchaeus' heart, a heart ready for change, and extends grace. In this encounter, we see how God meets us where we are, no matter how far we feel from him. Now, Zacchaeus' response to this act of grace is immediate. He repents and declares that he will give half of his possessions to the poor and repay 4 times what he has taken from anyone unfairly. This story of transformation, of how encountering Jesus brings about genuine change in our lives, is truly amazing. Think about it. Redemption is always possible. No matter your past, God sees you and calls you by name. When we open our hearts to him, we can be transformed. Like Zacchaeus, we must be willing to take that step towards Jesus, no matter how unworthy we feel. The parable of the 10 minas, responsibility and stewardship. Now, after the story of Zacchaeus, Jesus tells a parable that holds profound lessons on stewardship and accountability. In this parable, a nobleman goes away to receive his kingdom and entrusts 10 of his servants with a sum of money, a mina. Now, instructing them to invest it wisely, he is gone. Upon his return, the nobleman calls each servant to give an account of what they have done with their mina. Some servants had invested and multiplied the money, earning the nobleman's praise. One, however, buried the money out of fear and returned exactly what he had been given. The nobleman rebuked him, saying that at the very least the servant could have put the money in the bank and earned interest. Now, this parable represents the gifts, talents, and opportunities that God has entrusted to each of us. Like the nobleman, God expects us to do something meaningful with what we have been given. Some of us are like the first servants who take risks, invest wisely, and see growth. Others might be like the last servant, held back by fear or reluctance to act, doing nothing with what they have been given. You know, God's placed gifts in each of our lives, whether they are talents, resources, or time. We are called to be good stewards, to multiply and grow what we have been given for His glory and for the good of others. Ask yourself, are you using your gifts to their full potential, or are you hiding them away? The triumphal entry, recognizing the King. As Jesus continues his journey, he reaches Jerusalem, and here we witness what is known as the triumphal entry. Jesus rides into the city on a donkey, fulfilling a prophecy from Zacchaeus that Israel's king would come, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey. Now, the people welcome him with open arms, laying their cloaks on the road and praising him as their king, saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord." Yet, despite the celebration, many in Jerusalem failed to recognize what was truly happening. They were expecting a political leader who would liberate them from Roman rule, but Jesus came to offer something greater: spiritual freedom. Now, this scene challenges us to recognize the ways in which God is moving in our lives, even when it doesn't look like what we expect. Sometimes we miss the divine because we're so focused on what we think should happen. Now, think about this. Are we recognizing the divine moments in our own lives? Do we see God's hand even in the unexpected? You see, Jesus' triumphal entry reminds us to remain open to God's presence, even when it defies our expectations. Jesus weeps over Jerusalem, a heart of compassion. So, as Jesus approaches Jerusalem, he does something unexpected. He weeps. Jesus, knowing that the city will face destruction because its people did not recognize the time of God's coming is with them, weeps with deep compassion. He says, "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace." His heart breaks for those who are blind to the peace and salvation he offers. And this scene speaks volumes about the depth of God's love and compassion for us. Even when we don't see the bigger picture, even when we reject or ignore him, Jesus longs for our peace and wholeness. He grieves when we turn away from the life he desires for us. Think about it. Jesus' tears remind us of the depth of his compassion. He is not distant or removed from our struggles. Instead, he is deeply invested in our well-being. Ask yourself, are there areas in your life where you're resisting the peace that God offers? The Gospel of Luke chapter 19 is just rich with lessons that can transform our lives if we let them. For the redemption of Zacchaeus to the parable of the Minas, the triumphal entry, and Jesus weeping over Jerusalem, we are invited to consider how we can embrace redemption, take responsibility for the gifts we've been given, and recognize God's presence in our life. So, as you go about your day, take a moment to reflect. What are you doing with what God has entrusted to you? Are you seeking redemption like Zacchaeus, using your talents like the faithful servants, and recognizing the divine in your everyday life? And finally, are you open to the peace and compassion that Jesus longs to give you? I truly hope these reflections stir something in your heart today and remind you that no matter where you are in life, God's grace is always available. His purpose for you is real, and his love is unending. Now the choice is yours. Will you respond? Thank you for joining me today, my friends. Tomorrow I'll be discussing the Gospel of Luke, chapter 20. I hope you have a beautiful day. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Take care.